This week's Torah portion, the Etkanon, from the book of Deuteronomy, provides more than enough material for a few good sermons. I'll only try to give one tonight. Moses recalls how he pleaded with God to be allowed into the Promised Land. We receive another version of the Ten Commandments, and of course the Shema. The Shema in our Siddur is followed by the beginning verses of the Ve'ahavta. You know, you shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Reform liturgy, however, leaves out a paragraph of the Ve'ahavta, which also comes from the Torah, in fact, from next week's Torah portion, Akev. It begins, this missing paragraph, if then you obey the commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, love Adonai your God, and serving God with all your heart and soul, I will grant the rain for your land in season. I will also provide grass in your fields for your cattle, and thus shall you eat your fill. But the text goes on to say, take care not to be lured away to serve other gods and bow to them. For God's anger will flare up against you, and God will shut up the skies so that there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce. And you shall soon perish from the good land that Adonai is assigning to you. There you have it. Follow God's laws, and you will be rewarded. Disobey God's laws, and you will be punished. Pretty simple. In fact, that is the theology most people, including many of us, have been brought up with. Who beat me to the punchline? That we teach our children. Historically, this notion of divine reward and punishment has been used by many of the world's religions to cajole or scare adherents into conformity and certain types of behavior. Yeshayahu Leibowitz, the far less famous brother of the noted biblical commentator Nechama Leibowitz, wrote that this passage was meant for those who can be persuaded to do what is right only with the hope of reward and the threat of punishment. Early Reformed thinkers and liturgists were rationalists. They shied away from including prayers that relied too heavily on the miraculous, unproven, or hard to believe. Reformed thinkers rightfully failed to see a connection between morality and rainfall, behavior and abundant crops. The truth for them, and it still is for us, that we all know those who are the salt of the earth who seem to constantly suffer, and the wicked who seem to always get away with it. Our own experiences taught us that it is hardly black and white, but mostly gray. We hope that God will reward our good deeds and overlook our failures. What is interesting to note is that the first paragraph, the one we are familiar with, about loving God with all your heart, is phrased in the singular, while the paragraph that is omitted from our Siddur is written in Hebrew in the plural. What does this mean? This warning about our behavior, about following God, is not addressed to the individual, but rather to the community. In other words, we are all in this together, and we are responsible for one another. Our biblical ancestors were shepherds and farmers, so it is not surprising that the punishment for turning away from God is a lack of rain and dry land. Weather conditions could be the difference between life and death. In other words, a dramatically changing climate that we are all responsible for, or have not been responsible for. And now we are suffering the consequences. The fires out west that we have been experiencing are due to an abnormally dry spring, coupled with low snowpack levels, I'm not sure what that means, amid an ongoing drought. The haze that you may have noticed earlier this week, is a direct result from those wildfires across the country. Parts of Siberia are currently blanketed in fires that are raging through forests. And while some parts of the world are literally burning up, others are flooding. Over 200 people have died in Germany and Belgium due to the recent flooding, and almost as many are missing. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that the German language doesn't even have the words for the destruction that they have experienced. We know global warming is real. Since the mid-1990s, the Arctic has been warming faster than any other region on the planet. The water is rising in the wrong places. Air quality is getting worse everywhere, and parts of the planet are increasingly becoming inhospitable to human life. It might be time for us to heed those words of the second paragraph of the Ve'ahavta. If the Torah's imagery may not resonate for us, I want to share with you a lovely translation of the Ve'ahavta from the Siddur of a small Jewish community called Havarat Shalom in Somerville, Massachusetts. Love God with everything you have, your heart, your soul, your strength. These words which I give you here and now, take them to your heart. Teach them to those who follow you. Speak of them often, at home, at work, and on the road, at the beginning of your day and at its end. Hold them like a sacred chant that whispers inside you, spilling out into song. Feel the words in your fingertips. Keep them at the front of your mind, in the small spaces above your eyes. Let them guide your visions to rest in new places. Let them soothe and disturb you. Look up occasionally. The words will appear everywhere in the place you call home. Israel, your covenant with God is made of choices: holiness or profanity, life or its destruction. You can never keep from choosing. If you set yourself to love God with everything you have, to obey God with your entire heart, God's gifts will be yours. A vital earth, its sea and continents moving slowly in their own way. The rain and sun and snow and clouds forming and changing, each in their own way. If God's unity is always before you, all these will nourish and delight even longer than your days. The hills, the rainforests, the ice flows, and the deserts. The infinity of the life that nests and grows here on earth with us. Every living thing will bless you, will welcome you as neighbor. What you produce will multiply in goodness, and what you will not lack for what you need. But if you forget and choose instead to fashion gods of your own, if they spring up everywhere for you in your endless thirst for something undiscovered, you may lose everything you have: your family and your sustenance, your reason for being and your place of burial. This blue-green earth, so beautiful, so solitary, is as fragile as you are and as precious. Beware lest in giving way to excess, you risk too much. Remember this and take it to heart. Teach it to those who come after you. Place it in their hands, plant it in their minds. Meditate on these things at home and on the road, awake and asleep, in the beginning and at the end. Try to find them in every place we call home. Maybe it is black and white, after all.